Good day to everyone, and it's a good time to start, I'm hearing. So there we go. My name is Tina. I'll be moderating the discussion today. And today we're going to talk about the digital economics and how we can actually contribute by creating new competencies that will survive the digital economy. I have to thank the venue where we are gathered today. It's Strelka, and you all know where you are. So thank you, Strelka Institute. What a wonderful place. And I think the weather is just to order. By the way, today we're beating the weather record for the 21st century. Also, I have to thank Binary District, who organized and co-hosted the event. Binary District is based in Amsterdam, and this is a group that actually promotes technological education and creates the future of education for the people who will actually make our reality happen in the days to come. And also, I have to thank our major partner. It's Project Vostok. It's a universal blockchain solution for scalable digital infrastructure, and they are helping a lot to bring everyone in here together. So thank you, guys. And now it's time to talk. When we talk about digital economy, one of the things that really needs answers is how we actually get into digital economy without the losses. How do we make sure that our population, the ones that the economy is actually created for, can survive this change, can go through the shift as painlessly and as seamlessly as possible. So what are the jobs that we're staying with? In the States now, there is even a term, which is official terminology now. It's future-proof jobs. Believe that or not, we are thinking about the jobs that will not exist any longer. And people are now in the situation when we have to study every single day so that we are still competent, so that we are still up to the level that the economy where we live is expected us to be. So let's talk today about how those competencies are being formed. Let's talk about the way the digital economy changes our perspective and our everyday life, not just from the point of view of the competencies and professions that we're getting, but also from the point of view of the services that we can provide to the people to make sure that they are comfortable and productive in this economy. I am very much honored to introduce the guests that are in here today. I'm sorry, I'll be looking in my phone because I cannot remember all of your titles, guys. So from me and on. Елена Rahimova, she is the Deputy Director for Special Assignments of the State Corporation Rostech. Silje Bareksten, Head of Smart City Oslo Business Region. Oh, I'm sorry. It's so much light. We are beating all sorts of... Arsen Gariev. He is the head of Group of Regional Ecosystems and Development of RVC. And Evgenia Sachenko, head of the project office of Rosatom, the program digital transformation of the industry. I suggest that now all of the speakers have 5, 10, 12 minutes to talk, to see, to share their views on how the digital economy is changing our competencies. And then we'll discuss whatever's been said, and we will be taking the questions from the audience after that. So, Yelena, why don't you start?
Thank you so much. Nice to see all of us. And first of all, I would like to present a short story. I had a short interview before the session, and our discussion was about how to defend from the future and how to be confident with such situations like described in the famous Black Mirror. Everybody, I suppose everybody heard about it. So I hope we will help you to answer on this question during this session today. By the way, I would like to emphasize that there are big differences between such types things like digital transformation in our common life day by day, and the digital economy. I suppose it's that next step in our digital transformation, because our statement, our government thought about how implement the real future with digital tools in our economy and shift up it. So I think I will help with my colleagues to answer these questions today.
Thank you so much. Sylvia, what's your take on the digital future and how we can actually, influence the way people are coping with the change?
So, hi everyone, my name is Silja, and I've just traveled in from Oslo. I work with smart cities, and smart cities is a huge and quite unpredictable field at the moment. It's entailing a plethora of different technologies, different enabling technologies, and most of you have probably seen, as she referred to, Black Mirror and a series called Altered Carbon, which gives us kind of this future dystopia of how our world is going to look like in a few years from now. So, and you're absolutely right. There's a huge difference between digital transformation going on in our daily lives and the transformation of the systems that build our society. So one of the things that I work a lot with is government and municipal transformation in digital processes. For Norway, coming from a country that has been built on a legacy of oil, petroleum, and gas, an export of these fossil fuels, for us, the transition over to a digital economy is demanding, but it's necessary. And one of the most interesting things that we are seeing now is that not only are the whole economy changing, but we're seeing that different branches of the economy, the lines between what is, for example, a financial institution and a digital institution, what is an IT corporation or a software company, these lines are being blurred. And this is creating challenges, but also opportunities, because the workforce and the job community of tomorrow is a very different one from what we're seeing today. One of the most important areas in Norway and in Oslo, the capital where I live from and work, where we see that the digital technologies and the enabling technologies can help us create new and sustainable business that will carry our economy in the years to come, is within the bioeconomy. And by bioeconomy, I'm talking about biotechnology. In Oslo, we have some of the world's best research environments on biotechnology, and especially within genealogy and gene development. We recently had a method called CRISPR, which is a way that you cut and remove different genes in order to create specific agents that you would like to see in a body or in a substance. And we have huge research environments on bioinformatics, which is the crossing of biology and the use of information technology. So I would encourage everyone here, if you have any questions during this debate, that you just flag it, and we'll try to
definitely do that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely reach that phase as well.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Arsene, I know you have prepared a whole presentation. Here is the man with the pictures.
Yeah, I was asked, may I speak in Russian? I guess it's...
Sure, yeah.
It will be shorter for me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arsen Garev. I represent Russian Virgin Company. We are a state development institution, so my position, which I stay away from, is not as subjective as individual citizen that exists in the world of new technologies, but more of an organization that follows and complies with the function of state agents. And as we see a reaction on ever-changing technological landscape, and all the social landscape that also switches because of that. In Russian Venture Company, I am responsible for regional ecosystem development and NTI, National Technological Initiatives, but I would not call it one single initiative. It would be more rightfully called campaign. Я поговорил немного про национальную технологическую инициативу. Это наш
trying to tackle with market of the future and future technologies.
When we talk about these national technological initiatives, we use this slide that is called the matrix of NTI. So here, in my perspective, to answer your question of what is cross-cutting technologies and why are we dealing with them, is because we established this competencies center. So one of the goals is to establish a cluster of companies that will be competent on the global market, and we are very similar to Norway in this sense, so that, you know, as economy we could overcome the basically consequences of oil addiction, as we call it. So these technologies should allow Russian companies to apply technologies that are currently being formulated and establish this new technological landscape. That's why we call them cross-cutting technologies, because they penetrate various markets, various industries, and they change occupations and workplaces completely. So this matrix that is available and posted on our website about a week ago, Mr. Peskov, who is a special envoy of Russian president on digitalization, he presented a new matrix, and it includes such technologies as photonics, new renewable materials, and we also had 3 new sections. First section is dedicated towards technologies that are available now, so AI, machine learning, redistributed registries, blockchain technologies. The second wave, the second section is going to be robotics, advanced technologies, and the third wave is quantum computers, biotech is what actually Celia mentioned in her introduction speech. So these 14 competency centers were picked and now are in the process of being construction. Since we planned the budget for 3 years ahead, this is just a purely bureaucratic issue. We have about 7.8 billion rubles, which equals about 100 million euros, I think. So we are going to co-finance this to formulate regional agents with private sector, and to our surprise we saw a very high competition, because we had lots of applications to our competition. At the first stage we got 70 applications for these competency centers, and then we had several more stages to select the winners. And as Russian Venture Company, this is our task. We are the project office, have to accommodate all the issues. So these centers, they have 3 tasks ahead of them. First of all is research and R&D, basically. Second is training the personnel who are ready to work with these new occupations. That's to answer the question of Tina on how to prepare for the future. I will tell you more about that later, on how Competence Center is going to operate and how any person, you know, if he wants, can participate in these educational programs. So the next step is technological transfer and, well, like I said, training the personnel. So here are the 14 winners, 14 newly established competency centers that we've picked. But AI, of course, on the basis of physics and technology, so we have a lot of articles that it's going to be a nightmare when artificial intelligence will overpower humanity and they will make us, extinct, because Boston Dynamics are humiliating robots throughout their experiments. There is also quantum technologies in Moscow State University. It's absolutely new standards of encryption and opportunities of completely uninterrupted connection, which is very important in banking sphere, in the basically cybersecurity and so on. Third competency center is new energy sources. When we talk about new cars, drones that will deliver some stuff to our window or our doorstep. Without new energy supplies and energy sources, we won't go far. So that is why we will have these competency centers. So advanced technologies, new production technologies, or also we call it TechNet. So our markets are called nets because that's why we emphasize the principle of network organization of new markets. So St. Petersburg Polytech will do project planning.
And maybe you heard about the Cortege project. This is the new Russian president's car. Do you know about this? Have you heard about this? No, that's the name of this project. This is the huge limousine. So St. Petersburg Polytechnic University participated in this project. They passed crash tests for the first time. And the reason was that first they are projecting or designing this car and the crash test for this. They are designing this process, pass trials, and then this image that they have in digital format, when having a real crash test, it should comply with these norms, with standards. So this is what St. Petersburg University does, St. Petersburg Polytechnic University. That's why they were able to pass this crash test. We have another projects. Among those, there are center of southern Moscow, where they are working with genetics, and this development will serve for oncological medicine with the use of genetic technologies. And in the first group we have Far East State University, the technology of virtual reality, of additive virtual reality, where this technology can be used in some traditional areas. Maybe Rostec State Corporation also does it when training their personnel. In virtual reality, they show them how to deal with some systems or elements. So these centers were selected in the end of 2017, and in March of 2018 we selected another 8 centers. Big data, how to work with big data, what social networks know about us, what solutions can be made and taken. Then robototechnics, one in Innopolis and the second one in the Zelenograd, near Moscow, that's Moscow region. Well, this problem is well known because for 10,000 inhabitants of Russia we have small number of robots, and for example in Germany, in the United States, in China this number is higher. So robotization is the way to raise the efficiency of production. And another problem is what to do with the people that are losing their jobs during the automatization. This is the ethic problem. We also have St. Petersburg State University, who is dealing with blockchain technology. Distributive networks will be done by Moscow State Linguistic University. IoT, Internet of Things, smart teapots and other things will be done by Skolkovo, and we also have machine learning done by St. Petersburg ITMO University. Now, speaking about bureaucracy a bit more, I do realize that not many of you know about state programs, and maybe you don't know how these programs are operating. We introduced some innovations here. One of the most important principles is the principle of consortium. When you are applying this when you are sending this application, and universities may participate in different competitions of Ministry of Health, Ministry of Defense of Russia. So this is the traditional way to obtain financing. But this case was not traditional, because we just wanted them to have not only one partner who would need their head start, they should have presented the net of partners. And I don't see well from here, but I'll turn to my slides. In first competition we had 70 applications, and during the second competition we had 49 applications and 814 participants. So during 3 months we've seen that Russian universities got this idea very well, and they realized that without network of partners they will not be able to tackle this task. So these partners, in most of cases, are some companies, maybe some universities. 13% are scientific organizations and 4% are foreign organizations. These numbers were taken at the moment of filing an application. And all in all, we had more than 250 organizations that are making part of this consortium that is dealing with different technologies. In this regard, our bureaucratic innovation was that this consortium did not only sign the agreement, this consortium gives two-level model of management, how to deal with new technologies. This is our point of view that we are introducing now and implementing on the basis of our centers. Technological partners have to have opportunities to take digital solutions in their own sphere of industry, verification of results, defining of principles, how to redistribute the resources, and priorities while distributing the resources. So without feedback from companies, it will be impossible to deal with new technologies, because we'll always have some opinions from science, and our task is to provide the opportunity to take some applicable decisions and solutions for companies. And that's here where we'll have new products, and there we'll be able to open new markets. That's what we are doing in the framework of our Russian venture company. Thank you so much.
I'll have a lot of questions about that later. I'll have a whole list in here already. Well, Evgeny, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I don't have any presentation because I've been told not to have any presentation so that you will not be tired. I would like to say about 2 tracks that we have in the framework of development of Rosatom State Corporation, and how we are working inside in digitalization. And the second track is related to state and public agenda, where Rosatom and Rostechnology are participating in Center of Competences for the development of technological head starts and best practices. First part deals with, from one side, a positive moment. Rosatom was very lucky because of development of end-to-end of cross-cutting technologies that are called key enabling technologies in Europe, because we have external market where Rosatom is presented very well. It attracts those elements from Rosatom, and we have the goals to develop different objects. So this gives us some serious and solid requirements for the business model of our corporation and the branches that are representing this organization. As for our internal transformation, it was formed thanks to external demand. This high qualified client at the level of global markets. Another important element is how to create a system which would allow to companies like Rosatom being presented on the global level, how can they have different elements, how to help them to develop this new type of work, which we call digital transformation. which doesn't have happy end for everybody. Speaking of architecture of the program on technological head starts, we faced the issue that maybe technological head starts as an instruments are the most important thing, and one of the most important elements is in our heads, in the culture of values. And first of all, in order to go to the implementation of our businesses, of different solutions that are based on digital technologies, first of all, we have to change our approach to our own business, to client, to our competitive advantages, to reassess them and to re-evaluate them from the point of view of changes in global markets that are now going on in foreign countries during the last 15 or 20 years. That's why global companies are restructuring their businesses. For example, General Electric, Siemens, and other companies that have drastically changed their core business, preserving it at the same time. While analyzing approaches that are now existing not only in Russia but abroad as well, we analyzed almost all the innovative programs, Horizon 2020, Venturing Partnership American program, around 7 or 8 programs, and all of them have similar problem. Companies of different levels, from venture companies to industrial monsters, they have problem of two gaps, two death valley, as they call them. First problem is related to the fact that technology that are being developed to the level of technology readiness level of 4th or 5th level, when they have a prototype and when they show that this solution might be implemented, how to lead this technology to commercial application, how to develop solutions. It is rather hard and difficult. This requires different approaches, institutional approaches, and this requires solid investments that will be much higher than financial investments, and they will be different, they will differ from investments that are going at the level of venture financing. Second death valley is about scaling of these solutions. When we have some ready solution, when we worked on this in pilot zones, then the question arises how to support it, how to develop a system of sales on end solution. This is another obstacle. Those companies that are developing this product, they do not always have competences that would allow them to make money on these solutions. And analyzing those aspects that we have in the Russian Federation, we came to a conclusion that first of all we have to go from major companies transformation, companies that have state capital, for example, state corporation and public companies. In our GDP structure, we have around 70% of such kind of companies. So we have to do something in this. We have to start with this type of companies. And this is being done now in the format of strategic of digital transformation. Now, in major businesses, it is rather simple. Well, it is simple when we are talking about this, but in reality it's rather difficult because companies have to rearrange their own business models, and sometimes they do not just think in those categories. They have to rearrange their operational models and operational processes, and through different improvement of operational activities tracks, they have to analyze data that they are collecting, and they have to search for new effects of new competitive advantages that will allow them to preserve their own companies and to develop themselves on existing markets and trying to consider diversification of new markets. Thank you so much.
I instantly have a question to both Evgeny and Yelena, because, you know, every time it comes to all sorts of transformation of business, The most important thing is actually having the people who will manually do that. And besides knowing what's going on at the moment, they should be able to foresee a certain, bit of the future, to predict the way your business or your competence level will be going. How do you deal with the staff problem? Because I surely, as I work in both education and media, I cannot believe you do not have any staff problems. This is just not possible. How do you get the staff? How do you train the staff? Or do you participate in all sorts of programs with the universities that actually provide you with the quality staff that actually is capable of dealing with the sort of challenges that you as businesses face? So how do you guys do this?
Of course, it's a problem, and we try to apply a selective model. First of all, we try to grow up our internal staff, and of course permanently we are looking for on the market new people in different industry sections, and I'm not sure that the traditional education in our universities is the right way. As I know, Arsen mentioned Dmitry Peskov. He tries to solve this problem and to conduct transformation of the traditional education and traditional universities in our country, to integrate new approaches from international business schools, international companies such like Google's, Microsoft, and other has branches in our country. Here is the great possibility to looking for new, smart, young people, and for them it's the good ability to make contact with the corporations and other relevant big companies. So it's a great ability. Thank you.
Thank you. Evgeny, what's your solution?
Well, here we have two aspects. First one is that, and I've already touched upon this, we are talking about the culture of values. How do people perceive technologies that are appearing? How do they see them? How do they perceive them in their own businesses? In many our offices we have problems with mobility, with access to data. We have problems with access to their own colleagues while operating. That's why projects that we are implementing inside our Rosatom corporation, they can be divided into three levels. First level is the work with top management. Here, not only in state corporation, Rosatom, but for other major state companies, along with Ministry of Economic Development and Skolkovo school, we designed relevant courses for companies' top managers. And top management, starting next year, will be going through educational tracks and courses. They will be going abroad. They will be able to get acquainted with foreign businesses. They will be able to see how do foreign top management deal with their own businesses. How do they treat their own business models? What are those business models? How do they work with operational models of their own business? And I guess that this is the most important element, because driver of any transformation of existing business should be precisely top managers. Second level is for middle management. This is the next step, when middle management should formulate problems or obstacles that they are facing with in their day-to-day activities. They have to be able to think about these problems from the point of view of modern technologies. How can they solve this problem? How can they obtain a result that up to date was impossible in this company? Third level is linear management, people that are implementing and creating solutions on the basis of technologies and transforming this into the business. They are realizing what was created at the middle level and was supported by top level. And important element, one of the most important elements of Mr. Peskov's activity, this activity is really relevant and pressing because it is being done at the level of universities. It eliminates obstacles of classic education and it gives an opportunity for an employer to obtain results and skills in a short period of time. Inside Rosatom company, we are doing this thanks to participation in Digital World Skills. Last year it was first session of Digital World Skills. Now we are preparing for the second session that will take place this year. So we are moving along these 4 tracks. Thanks. Спасибо. Очень полезная информация от вас в одном ответе буквально. Арсен, когда вы говорите...
the education and bringing the change in the mind that allows the change in technology. How do you do that? Do you go to the universities? Do you actually foster your own specialists right there from the very first day that they actually step into a higher school? How do you propagate the values that you've been talking about?
Which values particularly do you mean?
In the very beginning, you said that you have a whole system of actually educating all sorts of professionals when it comes to digital transformation.
I suppose you would like to ask how upgrade our education and at the same time to keep the traditional ways, by the way, integrate new approaches from the wild world.
That was my next question. You just stole it.
Sorry.
Хорошо, спасибо, я понял.
I can give you 2 examples. First, as for applicable tasks of our center is the training of so-called classic specialists. And here one of the most important criteria and one of the most important tools is the project learning, project teaching, where a student or a master program student here not only attains some lectures, he been involved into real projects which are being carried out by the company. So he's not just modeling something, he participates as an employee to a real project. This is important, and our head, Mr. Pavalkin, our director, he knows about this because formerly he was deputy minister, and he knows that for students this is really interesting. They want to come into their profession and they want to see that what he is studying now may have a specific result. When there is an industrial client, for example, I'm almost sure that Rosatom and Rostech are more strict and more responsible than any other branch of executive branch, because they want to have this R&D work for their own business requirements. So when a person feels this responsibility, he knows that he needs to work good and he needs to be responsible. But this is a universal answer, because this is true for each branch and each industry, whether you're doing digital transformation or some classic things. And now I would like to talk about modern technologies. Modern technologies are more about Well, recently we had project session and we were drawing trends, and one of the trends that I proposed was that center of value creation is going to different ecosystem of network of different partners. As an example, I can give you some Great Britain banks, for example, they order some developments in information security of distributed registers, not to one institution. There is a whole community which is called Cluster 31, if I'm not mistaken, and they are working not in London City, but in the second banking cluster in London. I forgot the name. They have several floors in this central building, and there are designers there. They have their own ecosystem. They are talking to each other. They are forming some project groups, and they are solving these precise, specific tasks. So this network interaction, for example, hackathon, some summer schools for students, this is an important element, because this is where я прошу прощения.
I will interrupt you a little bit because here is state the best blockchain companies, Waves. It's your neighborhood. Maybe you heard about this company. So the great example, we has the best ways here too, and we should discuss it too. It's not only in England.
You are talking about blockchain laboratory of web. You are talking about blockchain web lab, if I'm not mistaken. Нет, это...
Waves.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've heard about this.
I suppose Web is going
Я полагаю, что...
his laboratory.
Может быть, к сожалению, не
I
слышал.
heard about it.
Okay. Российские банки тоже такой
Russian banks are doing the same.
Госбанки тоже.
For example,
Сбер много для этого делает.
Sberbank is doing a lot. And speaking in general, creation of new formats when people can solve different tasks collectively would be very useful for education.
Thank you. Yes. Celia.
Хотела бы прокомментировать, поскольку полагаю, что нужно здесь рассмотреть одно определение — цифровая грамотность. Я вот буквально сейчас хотела как раз об этом задать вопрос, поскольку цифровая грамотность — это основа всего, о чем мы здесь сейчас говорим. Один из самых больших вызовов, с которыми мы сталкиваемся, это тот факт, что советы директоров, менеджеры, заседания и топ-менеджмент, вот все это от малых до больших компаний, государственных в том числе компаний, у них очень низкий уровень цифровой грамотности. Так же происходит в Норвегии, и так же происходит в России, и так происходит во многих странах. Да-да-да, во многих странах.
We need to discuss how we can make more meaningful transitions of knowledge from these science and research environments that knows this technology and knows what this technology can do, and we need to grab the startup environments and the innovation environments, and we need to get the dialogue going the other way around, because as you were saying, to take management abroad and look at what other top management is doing, that's okay, but it doesn't really make that much sense. What I think you should be doing is that you should be taking your top-level management, be that public sector or private sector, and take them down into the levels of their organization and ask the people who are actually working with the problems and who are actually working with the nitty-gritty stuff. How are you solving this problem? What kind of capabilities do you need to have to solve these problems better? And then you go out and then you ask your local ecosystem. So this is a challenge that we're working a lot on in Oslo and in different hubs in Norway.
But this is what I was going to ask as well, as applied to the smart system, to the smart city.
Yeah.
There isn't such a thing as a unified or single understanding of what a smart city is in the world. So everywhere the technology will be different. And people have to cope with both, finding their ways around the city, considering how connected the world is and how much travel is developing. People do face the challenges, some just fit in instantly because of the technologies, others are struggling with it badly. So the question is, how do we develop this level of competence where people find themselves comfortable in this newly varied and very diverse technological world? Who is to be the center of, the central authority, or maybe the central I don't know, Mindmeister, who is creating this comfort in learning the technology and applying it to everyday life, making it comfortable. And the other question I wanted to ask, I'll just bombard you with questions in here. Sure. The other questions I wanted to ask is, there isn't such a thing as a smart city specialist university education. And it actually has so many different levels of competences that you require to build this new livable and comfortable environment. How do you deal with the lack of specialists there?
So to answer, or try to answer your first question first, so I think that we need to lift education and basic education to a whole other level. If we are to survive the digital revolution and the technical revolution that we're going through, we have to do something with our educational systems. And I don't know how this is for Russia, but at least in Norway, I know that teachers have traditionally not had the greatest of esteem in society, the role of being a teacher. So yes, so the role of being a teacher and your actual impact on how society is going to look like in just a few years needs to be elevated. And this is something that we need to bring up on the international debate, and we need to bring it up to the political agenda, that the whole way and the whole idea we are thinking about and the whole idea we have about our educational systems and our teachers need to change. In Norway, we're trying a lot of the time to put up, for example, code camps for kids. And now we're also trying something reversed where the kids from 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old teaches their parents and their teachers to code. That's really interesting. Right? Right. So we need more of these.
This is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We call it teach the kids to code, and then we call it teach the parents to code. So we need to develop new ways of thinking about education. So that's the answer to your first question. Secondly, when it comes to all this smartness, I've been working with technology for a while and with innovation projects and commercialization of research for a while. And what I see is that if we're going to make any sense of concepts such as smart cities, we first need to acknowledge that every city has its own specific challenges. Of course, there are some things that will always be universal. People need to have a good offering of health. You need to be able to move around the city, so we need good mobility. We need stable energy and infrastructure systems. But at the same time, our communities and our societies are so different that making one unified definition of smart cities doesn't make sense. So, in my opinion, every city needs to have an open and public debate about what they want their smartness to be. What is the smart edge of Moscow? What is most important
your definition, it's very interesting discussion for me, because in Rostech we are building many smart cities in our country, over Russia, and it's very interesting what the crucial elements of the smart cities. And of course, it's for all of us, it's interesting to know how you estimate Moscow in such type.
Yeah. So that, and also how, because we are talking about building new business and building new grounds for our economies, right? So I guess Russia, here and in the outskirts of Moscow, you probably have some competitive advantage that you should build on to build your new economy, as do Oslo. And for our part, it's, for example, the bioeconomy. That's just one example. But these things need to be interconnected in a way. And I really strongly believe that each city has to work out its own strategy for how they approach working with the term smart city.
So it should be combined, the benefits for the common citizens and the benefits for a whole economy.
Yes. yes, for sure. I think citizen focus and being citizen oriented is
How do you provide this focus?
It's okay.
This is my responsibility in
very
our company, and
Yes.
it's really interesting information.
Yes. So I don't know if you know, but in Norway, the public sector accounts for more than 50% of the economy. Right. So this means that every step the public sector takes to choose to invest or to not invest in a technology has huge impact on society. And for that reason, what we're really trying to do in Norway now, and I'm not saying that we're succeeding at it, but we're trying, is to open up the public sector towards our innovation ecosystem. We're doing that through trying to put up new programs that transfers technologies and know-how from the innovative ecosystem. For example, what we did in Oslo last year was that we piloted an accelerator program. And an accelerator program is usually a program designed to accelerate a company and its business model, and it usually involves some sort of equity investment. What we did was that we made a public accelerator program where the city defined some of its most pressing smart city related challenges, and it went out and it asked the local ecosystem, we need help to solve this challenge. What kind of solutions and most high-tech solutions do we have in our own backyard, so to speak? So this is one way of opening up and creating a dialogue where not only do you get a leveraged knowledge inside the public sector, but you also get
equality for everybody.
Yes, yes, exactly.
I have a question to corporations, both Rostech, Helena, and Evgeny with Rosatom. Are you ready as corporations to actually start working with the education to make sure that the state-run education system provides the kind of staff that you will be able to actually start working with instantly instead of reteaching them all over anew after they spend 6 years in the university? Do you think it's doable? Do you think it's necessary to actually step in?
We established corporate academy in Rostech, and we try to grow up people with appropriate
But you decided to actually create your own university rather than communicate or deal with the system that already is in place.
We have alliances. By the way, when you have corporate academy inside, you have appropriate context for dialogues with the other institutions and universities. It's much easier to be useful for anybody and to get any benefits from these alliances. Okay. Not only get, and you should be ready to give something.
Oh, thank you. Evgeny, how do you deal with this?
Я должен сказать о сущности.
Say about the essence of Rosatom Academy. This is not the training of technological skills. Here we talk about the changes in training of managers, changing of thinking structure, and we are attempting to create common rules and culture of values at the level of directors, middle management and linear management. As for the technological agenda, we, on the basis of our main university, MIFI, and on the basis of other universities that are working in our area, from the second and third year, we are launching collaborative educational programs, so the students can immerse to the specifics of our works from last year of the bachelor program or even before this. We are doing this during the last 5 years, I guess, and it is well developed in Atomstroy Export. This is a branch that is engaged in construction of nuclear energy facilities in the global market. We have 36 blocks that are now under construction abroad in 10 countries, and we are having negotiations with different countries. So this is how we are working with skills. Plus we have world skills and digital world skills. Those are two tracks that help us to train technological element, what we called vocational training before. И Ростех также...
It's a foundation of Dmitry Peskov initiative. So
does the system of actually nicking the students from the universities before they are being hired by other companies pay back? Do you have a higher quality staff because of working with the universities?
Конечно.
Yeah, sure.
Если коротко, конечно.
Saying briefly, yes.
Thank you. I think the
Большое спасибо. Думаю, что у аудитории у нашей есть вопросы. Так ли это?
None?
Что, нет?
Probably too hard. I'm still very grateful that you found some time during the workday to come and join us here today. I had more questions to everyone. Arsen, when talking about all sorts of those wonderful high-tech things that we discussed today, our country is so big and it's so very varied in the different levels of digital penetration anywhere. How do you deal with that? Is there even such a task for you or a challenge for you to make it more homogeneous, to make it more even everywhere?
Well, digital economy program has a task to ensure internet penetration. Some days ago I was riding a train from my parents, and in the city of Sizran, a guy from Australia entered my train, and he was going from Melbourne through Russia to Europe to the United Kingdom, I guess. So he said that he didn't have any problems with connection. Moreover, he was really glad about the price of mobile communication, because everybody can have an access to information, to internet, and so on and so forth. So from the point of view of internet penetration, in general, I think in Russia it's okay. Well, if we take an average numbers, we are doing well. The issue is how to involve our great country, our vast country, into these technological transformations. Here we can have two formats. First one is being implemented by the Agency of Strategic Initiatives. They have boiling points programs. First boiling point is in Moscow, near the US Embassy, and now they have this network of boiling points throughout Russia. And this is the point of attraction for active persons. They have lectures, they have different broadcasts, they are discussing the image of future regions. This is one of the most important formats, and I visited some boiling points, and I was really impressed by what they are doing. Second format that we are doing in Russian venture company is the original agenda of National Technological Initiative. Now we are having Technoprom exhibition taking place, and they are discussing national standards. We are now trying to rearrange our understanding of the participation of some Russian Federation regions in such high-tech programs. What is this? How, in what format could they participate in these programs? Well, it's one thing when we talk about Moscow, St. Petersburg, but when we are talking about the regions without strong universities, where the density of population is not very high, how could those regions be involved into some high-tech activities? And the third notion, third comment, we have to understand that one thing is technological production, and the second thing is the application. For example, contactless payment is a difficult task by itself. It requires technologies, it requires elimination of some barriers. But if somebody, to install a terminal in some small shop, in small village, will not require any additional skills. You can do it easily, If you have PayPass, you can pay without credit card, only with your mobile phone, even in some small village. So this influence of new technologies on our day-to-day life is not such a difficult task.
When you were saying that new technology is actually easy to get because it's a very low-level skill threshold. It's a very low-level skill threshold, but then the technology is successfully implemented. But as soon as people need to get new skills that require more than just looking at the way other people do that, that's a problem then.
About владеть новыми технологиями. Yes, I agree with you. It will be really relevant when we have now the raising of our retirement age in the labor market. Well, will these retired people go to the labor market? What do we have to do with this? This is another challenge that we are now facing, and we have to do something with this. Net educational programs, additional education programs is one of the formats that can be implemented, and we have many platforms there. And the issue and the question is the motivation. I think many of you use different platforms like Coursera. What's the percentage of courses that you finished? Maybe you heard some 2 or 3 videos and then you stopped. And then maybe you went through some course, and would you be able to find new job with new competences that you obtained from this online course? That's the question. Maybe in some remote area, if we are talking about remote area.
Okay, you have to spill the beans now. Did you obviously try to experiment with all sorts of technologies in the city for the citizens and see how well they do with the population? So did you have any, I don't know, experiences with the technologies that you thought would be easy and convenient and fast applicable right there in the city, but they didn't work? And do you know why they didn't work? Ooh. Well, at least not work the way you predicted.
That's a good question. I think that perhaps we are in a particular situation in Oslo and Norway because our population is so small and it's so evenly distributed when it comes to digital literacy. So our government has been very careful not to, shoot out projects that have a high chance of failing, actually. And this is a problem, fear of failure in all these technology projects, but that's a whole nother discussion. I guess one of the most interesting things that have been tested a lot and where we've had a lot of expectations as to what it can do for the public is autonomous vehicles and autonomous mobility. There's been huge public debates about it and how promising these technologies are and what it can do to enhance public transport and how it can make people move away from using their private car and how it can alleviate carbon dioxide and everything that it can do for the environment. But truth be told, all of these tests haven't really gone that well. And I guess for you who've been following the bigger tests of, for example, Tesla or Volvo, you would know that there's been some slight challenges with the technologies regarding autonomous vehicles. So I guess this is one example. But what I have to comment on was that he mentioned the challenges regionally. And I think that Norway in many ways can be seen as a miniature Russia in terms of how our demographics look, because Norway has an extremely vast population. And one of the discussions that I really miss when we talk about all of these promising technologies are how are these promising technologies going to create more livability and more opportunities for people to actually stay in the rural areas of our countries and actually develop some sort of business there that they can live out of. Can we use VR technologies to enhance, for example, touristic experiences? How can the wireless payment technologies be of help to the service industries, etc., etc.? This is something that...
I know Adam has used it.
Yeah.
Well, can I add something? I can give you one example. How do digital technologies can ensure higher quality of life in rural areas or in remote areas? Once I've been asked to have a project session for some company on digitalization. They wanted to think how digitalization can influence on business processes, do they need to reinvent their strategy, and so on and so forth. I've been told, well, you are from Russian venture company, so can you help us? Be our moderator, please. And the takeaway that I had is not that such digital technologies may be applied in such way, but the takeaway is that that we, after this, that some of the specialists after the session, they said, well, I don't want to live in the world where TPOP would know everything about me, where Facebook will know everything about me, will offer advertisement to me. Well, I can go to rural area, I will produce milk and living quietly, so I don't want to live in the digital world. Да, ставьте себе свою эту реальность черного зеркала. Ну, мы самая крупная страна во всем мире, у нас прекрасная возможность создавать. Не будет вообще никакой связи. Например, плата Путарана. Вы там можете, например, провести время без различных гаджетов, без какой-либо связи. Уважаемые...
Thank you.
Добрый день. Уже было много сказано про то, что будет, в каком векторе будет развиваться
about the development of universities, education, motivate school pupils. Maybe they'd be frightened when they would know how do you teach digital transformation in universities? But why? Well, because recently I graduated from schools, and I know that my friends are afraid of passing exam of mathematics and physics. Well, I have two kids, 2nd grade and 6th grade, and I can say that I do digital transformation. I not always can understand their language, and they really feel well in this area, and maybe traditional school is falling behind in its programs, and we need to push it up, push it forward. This is my personal opinion. So you don't see any problem? You too? Well, we have an Olympiad Games where school pupils have some difficult tasks, and they have mentors in order to help them to solve them. A couple of years ago, school pupils showed Dmitry Medvedev robot cockroach. This is not the figuratively. They took living cockroach, they insert microscheme, and they had to manage it on some cockroach competitions. And through those formats, school pupils were able to participate in this digital world, and they got interested in this. On our competences, we analyzed the format of educational activity. In some, they have strategies that according to their strategies, they are working with schools because they know that they will need some professionals that will know this and this, and we are ready to use different formats so that they can see and they can understand if it is attractive for them. Well, with your question, you touched upon a very profound topic, even more profound than you intended to. Yelena has touched upon this issue today about the Black Mirror and the aspects that Britons touched upon in the TV show. We are talking about social elements. And if we, people that grew up in the era before digitalization, and we are now entering new reality, digital reality, where our communication is not at the level of physical communication, but at the level of digital communication that have different specifics. For example, zero transaction in this virtual area. So the question is, what world that our modern pupils are growing in, and do we see any differences between the world that they perceive and the physical world and virtual world? This is the main issue that concerns me a lot. Thank you so much for your question. We have to really think about it.
Yeah, I actually have a comment because it's a really good one. And I think that we need to strike a balance between all of this technological and digital that we surround ourselves with. Because, I mean, there is probably a good reason why the founders of Apple and Microsoft and other gigantic electronic companies out there deny their children to use iPads and other digital devices until they are, you know, grown up. And research has proven that you know, our cognitive connections actually change when we are too much exposed to technology and screens of different kinds. So definitely, if we're going to be able to cope with the exponential rate that technologies are developing in, we need people, perhaps you, I don't know what you majored in, that are able to strike this balance between technology and psychology, which is something I'm very excited about. What's your major?
Economics.
Okay, which is also very interesting. So I encourage you to explore that realm in between technology and psychology.
Thank you.
We're coming to a new level of humanizing the technology. Surprisingly, I've been doing a research for that. There is only one university in the world. It's a tiny, like an itsy-bitsy teeny-weeny university in Netherlands that teaches human aspect of technology. And somehow I think we're missing in that badly because we are losing an older generation, I feel, because we do not have the people who can actually translate from technological to good old human and then back.
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons that the domain of smart cities has become so immensely popular, because a lot of that has to do with explaining very advanced technologies to people in a simple way that makes them understand how you can utilize it and what it's for.
Well, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, I see a raised hand there. Don't be shy, fire away.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you so much for the discussion. I would like to ask, because today I've heard many times that schools, universities are falling behind. What will you do with our educational system? Where to go to? What can we change? Думаю, что это вопрос для всех. Давайте с вас начнем. Well, answering previous and these questions, I think that they are interdependent. Rostec, being a state corporation, has supported serious project. This is the co-working or school for gifted children. Maybe you heard about this. With the support of Russian president, was created in the city of Sochi, where kids, through competition, for the third year, they are able to send their applications. They are passing a 1 or 2 months course along with teachers, best teachers from all over the world. And, for example, those who like mathematics or physics, they have humanitarian elements. For example, they also study arts. This program is really interesting, and this is our contribution, Rostec's contribution, because this is a fundamental step. Speaking about changes to infrastructure, well, the project that our department has, it is called electronic education. For the past several years, we are trying to transform and to insert this education into traditional cultural values, and for this we need to create infrastructure. Ваша очередь.
Yeah, so practically, one of the interesting things that the biggest university in Norway, the University of Oslo, has been doing lately is that working on something they call the Life Science City. So the Life Science City and the Life Science Cluster is going to be an area on the campus, on the main campus of the University of Oslo, where they're going to co-locate researchers, startups, the extended research community with private organizations, corporations, and interest organizations in one building and one environment, where these can share knowledge and interact, and where research projects that are multidisciplinary can emerge and can develop with wet labs, dry labs, etc. So I think co-locating these different environments together is one answer to your question. And another one is to have campus strategies that make sure that academia is no longer allowed to be alone on the campus and do their thing, you know? You need to kind of...
It's very similar, like in Sochi, you describe it better than me, but it's the same.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that this is the way to go.
Get out of your cubicle,
Get them out of their cubicles and out of their labs. Well, they're allowed to be in their labs, but not alone all the time.
Arsen, what will be your list of recommendations then?
Арсен, какие у вас рекомендации? Well, in my first slide I had metrics with 4 edges. One of the edges was talent edge, and there are some instruments that our initiatives are using, except for elements that I've already touched upon. We also have a roadmap, as we call them. It's our movement network of clubs. Previously we had House of Pioneers in the Soviet era. Now we have these small clubs, and we have a network of quantoriums. The third element, maybe you've heard about this, was one of the first experiments for 1,000 persons in digital offices for regional participants, the project of NTI University. This is the new version of education where our colleagues are trying to elaborate individual educational trajectories for each person in order to create project teams. For example, a man comes, he passes through the test, he says what he wants, colleagues are trying to assess what profile he would be interested in, and they're giving him some courses. And in the middle of July, we had this first experiment in the Ruski island. They were studying from the 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. And also they had different homework. So 1,000 persons went through this project, and now colleagues are working with this data that they accumulated in order to improve this recommendation system. This is a new format of education. We call it our NTI University. In the recent future it will be introduced, and now it is being developed, of course. Evgeny, ваша очередь. Well, I will not answer directly. Well, first thing is that the basic education should not disappear. Mathematics, disciplines, and physics, those are 2 categories, 2 groups that should remain. They are the basics of digital technologies and advanced technologies, gene engineering and other, from genome to proteome. So they are basic. We need these basic knowledges. How to simply transfer this information to kids, preschool kids. That's like we are doing this in the technological project Smeshariki. Or how do we do this for retirement persons? We cannot say pensioners now because of the retirement age reform. So those are the things that was called previously, we called it popularization. And in simple format, we were able to explain some difficult technological things, to explain those things at the level of comparison, at the level of comparing with the real life and its implementation into real life. We were able to explain those difficult notions to common people. So this approach was really successful. This is the most simple and most interesting approach. From the point of view how to mix industrial component and school education, I would oppose to this, because kids have to have their childhood. They will have plenty of time to work in the future.
So humane.
No,
I see parents clapping here. Maybe grandparents too, huh? More questions?
Добрый вечер. Спасибо за такую вот дискуссию. И хотел бы задать
This discussion,
затронуть такой вопрос, как
I
информирование.
would like to ask about the information for citizens and the awareness raising. We were talking about social transformations in our societies. What do you think? Will it be important to raise awareness from the mass media, from state television channels? For example, our discussion will not be broadcasted on the federal TV channels, and in many remote areas, in small cities, they may have internet, but the speed is really low. I just want to ask you, what's your opinion? Should we work in this direction, in awareness raising? Can I? Yeah, please. So here, this issue of how to inform our population is related to economic aspects, because it has two main tasks: social aspect, how to prepare our population for some changes, and economic aspect, how to involve our population with necessary level of competences and knowledge in order to solve some task. Well, I think that's what we have to discuss, and now it's just a matter of fact. Awareness raising has shifted from federal TV channels and radio broadcasting and other common means through mass media, for example, to Telegram. They has shifted to Telegram channels, to other means of mobility, and I guess that this is the new reality, a new approach that we see now. And of course, we have to be very careful with those approaches.
For example, we just had one TV channel before, and they broadcasted all the information. Now we have multiple channels, whole large variety, and you can choose based on your mental profile, on your peers, on your interests, everything really. And here we have a very complex aspect. When you subscribe on this channel, you automatically take this information as confirmed, as the true information. And within this format, of course, you just have to pace yourself a little bit and, of course, take a sidestep and take a look at all the information that comes in and how a person is reflecting upon this information and how it actually correlates with the reality. So about 2 months ago, I read a lecture to HR people of central bank, not on digital economy, but on social bionization. So, what aspects? And the key slides in my presentation, I just made a very simple slides with pictures, no words. So the key slide for me was the average type of Striptych and Boss. So it was 500 years ago when he made this painting, the Garden of Pleasure, I think it was called. And on the average part of this painting, it showed how humanity is enjoying all the gifts that the God bequeathed upon us. The leftmost part related to the appearance of Adam and Eve, and the rightmost part represented some various torture that there could be in religious aspects. So it's basically a prototype of hell. It really correlates with digital technologies, in my understanding, especially in current basis, because the phenomena of digital technologies and transfer of those to us, throughout which we can increase our mobility without making any sort of transactions. And when we can very quickly use services that we didn't know before, I'm not going to scare you, but we're going to have to pay for this. Currently, socially active person that lives in a world that has all the CCTVs and all the sensors and detectors. The digital twin of this person is being assembled in 3 months with an accuracy of up to 70%. The question is, who's going to use your digital information? This is open for debate, not just in Russian Federation, but in the entire world. So, moving from the subject of information, I actually touched upon some various
things. Thank you so much. We're not trying to ostracize you in any way. It's just that the sound pattern is sort of splitting us up this way. No politics. I hope Strelka Institute hears me, and as a person who works in the media for pretty much my whole life, can I please request a session on content strategy for social change, please? I think that will be most fascinating to see that media information literacy as a new type of science can do for actually bringing that change from technologies that are so very high level that we are so far behind as a society to actually make society interact with them and, you know, just get better. Any more questions? If not, then...
Could I just comment? Yeah, because the way I understood your question, perhaps it wasn't 100% correct, but you were touching upon the fact that people who live in more rural areas may have, for example, a low Wi-Fi connection or bad telephone connection, etc. And this touches upon something else that is really important, which is to make sure that we don't create an even bigger digital divide. Because this is a challenge that we're facing that we're also not debating enough. I mean, in Norway, what we're trying to do to face the challenge that we have a very distributed population is that we try to make sure that we build out all the necessary digital infrastructure, fiber, 5G coming right up. These kind of technological infrastructures are built all over the country, so we don't make a difference in anybody in order to have everyone being able to tap into that digital revolution and not feel left out. And if we don't succeed in handling the opportunities for social mobility in a good way, I think that can make for some very scary scenarios in the future where we have parts of our population that are outside the technological realm. That's a dangerous and worrisome future.
Thank you, everyone. I think it's pretty much time to run up, so it's the last comment.
I'm absolutely agree with you, and of course it's needless to say that we have to think every time when we're talking about digital transformation about equal opportunities for all and cities dwells, because it's our responsibility.
I have to thank all the speakers, Yelena, Silvia, Arsen, Evgeny. Thank you so much. It's been an honor being with you on the same stage. Thank you. And I do hope you have enjoyed the session, and I'll stay on for more lectures today and tomorrow. And see you some other time.